Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Amy Downie from the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. Amy's been a qualified horticulturist for about 4 years, and on her Instagram bio, it says that she does escarpment horticulture and also says happy little horticulturist. And that is possibly one of the most accurate descriptions I've ever seen on an Instagram bio because this chat with Amy was an absolute joy to have. Talking to someone who is as passionate about what they do is why I love doing this podcast. And it's pretty clear that Amy loves what she's doing. I was really looking forward to chatting to her because specifically to find out more about what escarpment horticulture was. And it was just as fascinating as I hoped it would be. So I reckon plenty of other people will enjoy this chat as well. And I loved how she had an influential teacher when she was at school, which kind of made her start thinking about horticulture. And then a lucky series of events led to her getting a taste of it, and then from that day, she just knew that's what she loved. So, yeah, anytime someone loves their job, that makes me happy. So it's great to talk to them and have them on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of developments Amy comes up with in her future work. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Amy Downie. Amy, thank you for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Thanks so much, Joel. I'm so excited to be here. So I often say that I kind of accidentally fell into horticulture. It wasn't really something that I had expected to do, that I had planned to do leaving school. It wasn't even something I really knew a lot about leaving school. Although I say that, I would definitely mention like the signs were there, I think, that in school we had kind of a environmental science class run by a wonderful lady, Andrea Savage. And it was one of my favorite classes, and it was kind of focused on like planting and getting out in nature and seeing wetlands. So I loved that class. So there were little hints there, but I just didn't really know myself that it was even really an option and a path that I could go down. So I grew up in the country, and then I moved to Melbourne and was studying animal and veterinary bioscience. And kind of as I was studying, I was figuring out that maybe this wasn't quite the right path for me. Maybe I wanted to explore some other options. Went on and did some further studies. And during that time, I had a family friend who had a gardening business. And she was pregnant at the time and just needed a little bit of help with just some extra mowing, just an extra pair of hands to help her out before she had her baby. And so I was really lucky to connect with her and get that as just a casual job. And to be honest, as soon as I started, that was it for me. I was like, this is amazing. I need to do this every day. Like, this is the career that I want to be in. This is too much fun. Being outdoors. She said her name was Sarah, was amazing and taught me a lot about the plants and the plant names. And that was it. I was like, I have to do this. And then so from there, I kind of spoke with her about how she got involved in the industry. And she mentioned that she had done an apprenticeship. So I worked with her until she ended up finishing up and went and had her baby. And then I looked into getting an apprenticeship. I ended up joining with AGA, which is Apprenticeship Groups Australia. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yes, a few different ones. I've heard of Australia Apprenticeship Support Australia, and yeah, they usually
Yeah,
they're the same
yeah.
business. They just change their name.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. I think they're pretty common here in Melbourne, actually. And so they were great, and they were kind of a partial employer of mine. And then I signed as well with the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria. So I interviewed with them, and they were my host employer. So I did nearly 3 years of an apprenticeship with them. So I worked 4 days at the Royal Botanic Gardens. This is the one in the city. And then I also studied 1 day a week at TAFE. And so Chloe Foster, actually, who you've had on the show, she was one of my teachers at TAFE.
All right.
Oh, and she was amazing. I'm so glad that you interviewed her because what
So
an
have I.
amazing. Yeah. She's been a great mentor for me all along the way, to be honest. So I did my apprenticeship and then was very fortunate that as I was kind of coming to the end of my apprenticeship, a position became available at the gardens for a qualified horticulturalist. And I just sort of spoke with the managers and said, oh, would you mind if I applied? And they said, go for it. And just luckily, all the stars aligned, and I was so fortunate to get the job there and have been there ever since. And am now the curator of the Grey Garden Escarpment, and the Camellia collection. And so I have been doing that now for about 4 years and have just been on this insane and incredible kind of whirlwind journey where I've just done some of the most incredible things that I never even would have imagined. I've had so many amazing opportunities thanks to the gardens and other people that are in the industry, and such supportive people, may I say, one of the best industries. Yeah, it's just been a whirlwind and just a roller coaster, to be honest, but one of the most fun adventures I've ever been on, and excited to kind of see what's next as well.
Yeah, you must have been pretty pumped where you're looking to get thinking, I wouldn't mind doing a horticultural apprenticeship, and then all of a sudden, the first job you get, Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne.
That was insane. And I do have to say that I remember looking, there were a list of places that I could apply for. And I remember seeing the Royal Botanic Gardens and I just went, no way. Like, there's just no way I would get the job there. I'm not even going to apply. And then I had a chat with some people and they were like, go for it. Why not? Like, just give it a go. And thank goodness they said that, because I can't imagine where I would be now if that hadn't have happened. So a really good lesson, and I think I definitely have kept that with me from then on, of just like, just give it a go. Who knows what could happen? Just go for it, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Worst thing that happened is if you applied for that and you want it, you didn't get it. That's the worst thing that can happen.
Exactly, exactly. Then you move on. But
Yeah.
or the best thing, you get it, and then you're on this crazy adventure.
Yeah. I love what you said about when you're at school and you had that awesome teacher who was teaching the environmental science. And
Yes.
I wonder whether it's the teacher is awesome because you love what they're doing, or you love what they're doing because the teacher is awesome. Like, yeah,
It's true. It's so true. I would say in this case, it is both.
yeah,
She is an amazing woman, but you're so right. I think that it's one or the other, isn't it? Sometimes it's whether you're just attracted to what they're teaching and interested in that, and that just changes your whole outlook on the class, or the teacher or anything. But Andrea is also an inspiration. She's incredible.
Andrea Proctor.
Oh, and Andrea, so she's the one who I think recommended me for your
Yeah.
podcast. She's
Or is
another
that,
one.
that was Andrea Savage, your teacher.
This is Andrea
Yeah.
Savage, the teacher, but Andrea Proctor, again, an amazing, amazing woman. And I spent a lot of time with her recently in Singapore. We both went over for the 8th Global Botanic Gardens Congress. And Andrea, I was doing my first sort of global presentation there, and I was absolutely terrified, so scared. And I met up with Andrea, and she was doing 3 presentations, and I only had one, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're just an unstoppable force." She's incredible and such a wonderful kind of support and mentor as well for me in the industry.
So was she doing 3 separate ones?
3 separate, yeah, present. She might have even done 4. One was like a workshop, and then 2 other presentations. And then as well with going on the tours and networking in between, like most people did 1 presentation and that was enough to like terrify them for the whole time. And once it was over, you could relax. Where Andrea was just on the whole time, and every presentation was perfection. She's just incredible.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump back into that later. But when I only went to the Botanic Garden for the first time last year, and I got a
Ah,
tour by Andrew Laidlaw showed me around because that was the first time I'd been there.
yes.
I would find it so intimidating to like when you go to work somewhere like a place that big. So
Yes.
was it pretty full on when you first started working there?
Totally, totally. It's just inevitable that you're going to be lost,
Yeah.
to be honest. And we say that to all the interns and the apprentices now. It just happens. You just know you're going to. And I know that was the intent of the design, to have the winding paths so that you do get lost in the
Right.
garden. So definitely one of that scale. And I think one with that reputation too was a little bit intimidating. But as soon as you meet the not only the horticulturist, the botanist, all of the work is there. They are just the most incredible and kind and supportive people that are really willing to teach and to share their knowledge. So they encourage asking questions. They encourage getting lost in the gardens, and that really helps. And it just makes it a lot less daunting once you start. It's terrifying beforehand, though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was one of the things I couldn't get out of my head, like just how massive it is, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's, yeah, I don't know. I understand it'd be like I said, intimidating, and I couldn't understand, especially young people, how you just start there and get lost.
Yep, all the time. You kind of want to have a buddy at all times because you're just like, I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And you end up going out and it's like 30 minutes past the starting time. And you're like, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to get out there. And then you've got this asking you where to go and you're like, I don't know. But
Yeah.
it happens. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah, and everyone who I've had interactions with from the Botanic Gardens, whether they're or Australian one, like through the show gardens that we've done the last couple of years, they've all
Yeah.
been just really awesome, genuine people. Like they actually they'll because you'll meet someone, they ask a few questions, but they're just asking generic questions. But it feels like the folks from the Botanic Gardens actually genuinely care about
Yes.
what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. You're so right. It's so easy to tell. You just can feel that straight away. And they are the most passionate and honestly interested people. They're just, I find this as the industry as a whole. I mean, I've been really lucky where a lot of the people that I've interacted with are like that and are really supportive and want to share as much as they can with you, want to see you succeed, want to bring you along with them if they're succeeding. But definitely at the Botanic Gardens, it feels like they highlight that the most almost. Like every single horticulturist there is brilliant in their own way and such a good person. And the team is such a tightly knit team because everybody's just so genuine and lovely. And you can just tell it's
Mhm.
so genuine there. It's a great, great place to work and a great atmosphere.
So what sort of things did you do when you first started working there?
Yeah, so I did a lot of just kind of so everybody has their own area. So you're a curator of a collection. So for example, it might be the Southern China collection or the Australian Forest Walk, which is all native plants, Long Island, which is indigenous plants. So all the horticulturalists have their own area that they're kind of the expert of. And then there are other areas and other garden beds which are kind of team areas. So I did a mixture of working with people with curatorial work. So that's being in the area, doing small scale, maybe design work, planting new plants, pruning, looking after the area just in really general horticulture ways. And then things like mapping, doing research into plants. Maybe they go on collecting trips and wild collect species and then bring them in to kind of host in an ex situ kind of style, if that makes sense, for sort of conservation purposes. That's a huge part of the curatorial work. That's probably just a snippet of what they do, but that was kind of something that I was lucky to be involved with and get to experience with them. And then obviously a lot of the general site maintenance and also teamwork. So I did the other important things like the mowing, learnt to do the ride on mower and the blowing and clean up across the site, brush cutting, all those really basic things that are really important that you need to know. A lot of as well, collaboration is a huge thing at the gardens. So they're always connecting with other botanic gardens or volunteers, giving tours, maybe doing videos and media things. And I was so fortunate, and this is one thing the Botanic Gardens does really well, is they really immerse you in all of that. So even as an apprentice, there was the opportunity to do presentations or tours of the gardens or go to other botanic gardens and meet and learn from them, workshops, things like that. They do everything, the gardens, which is incredible. And they include their apprentices or their interns in all of it. So I was really lucky to get a taste of everything, it feels like.
Yeah, that's an awesome difference that you would find if you're working at like a public park and you were sort of doing an
Yeah.
apprenticeship there, whereas you're going to be sort of only working there at that time. But it seems like they sort of get you out of the site so you can actually learn a bit more as well and bring stuff back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And even just like, people's gardens, maybe in Toorak or something who have amazing gardens, they still have that connection there. And encourage going and getting inspired by other plantings to maybe find a new plant that you didn't know that works perfectly in your collection or could be a great addition to the gardens as well. And I think too that collaboration with science is huge and, getting plants ID'd and verified to then have labels. Again, the collecting trips to go out in the field and maybe collect a threatened species and store seed in the seed bank, things like that. They're really well rounded in what they do, and they do have a strong conservation focus, which is something, it's a little rabbit hole that I'm falling down at the moment and I'm in love with. It's so important and so much fun, and it's something that, again, the Botanic Gardens do very well.
So, and did you have a favorite, like it might have changed now, but did you have a favorite part of the gardens when you first started?
Crazily, which again, it's like a pinch me moment. I can't believe it. The Grey Garden was my favorite. There were other areas that I loved, and there's so many amazing collections there, but the Grey Garden was just so unique and so interesting. And it's one of the most diverse collections in the gardens because it can be from anywhere in the world. It could be indigenous, it could be exotic, it can be any kind of plant from a cactus to a salvia, a centuria. But the only kind of criteria is that it is grey.
All
So
right.
it is so diverse there. It's got so many amazing plants. And as well, it's one of the hottest parts in the gardens, which I love because I'm like a lizard and I freeze in the winter. I love the sun. I love the heat. So that actually was one of my favorite parts. I loved being up there. And to now kind of have a full circle moment where that's my area that I'm the curator of is insane.
And when did you start looking after that one?
So about 4 years ago, so that I got a little taster as an apprentice of being able to look after an area. It wasn't a collection, so it was called the Northern Border, which is a garden bed that's kind of attached to one of the gates. So not a collection, just a general garden bed, but still important. So that was my first taste of doing that curatorial work, getting used to the mapping and the research and propagations and things like that. And then when I went and got the fully qualified full-time position after my apprenticeship, that was I was given the option of a couple areas to take on as a curator, which was lucky in itself, and the Grey Garden was one of them. So that was absolutely straight away, that was the one I knew I wanted, and was very, very lucky to get to have that. So about 4 years I've been there.
Yeah, right. Have you, there's much change within it in that 4 years? Like what sort of
Yeah,
things do you do?
absolutely. So one of the things is we've had a lot of projects, or not a lot, but a couple of projects up there. So another part of the Grey Garden is the Temple of the Winds, which is just kind of the top part of the Grey Garden. And that had a kind of I don't know how to say, they redid the steps of the temple because it was falling apart. And then as part of that, they did a little project where they redid the bed around the outside of the temple. And so introduced new gardens. They kind of extended the bed, introduced new plants to the garden that were still part of the Grey Garden. And then the next year, they did something that was called the Citygate Project. So it was just a little bit where the fence line moved. Again, they reintroduced a new garden bed. They put in these new beautiful gates, which were donated by Lady Potter, which have these amazing little blue wrens all over the gates. They're stunning, and I definitely recommend going to have a look if you haven't seen them. But that was the same. It was creating a new garden bed in a lawn space, introducing new species to that, and the new fence line and everything. So that was kind of a really fun project, quite a big one to be part of too.
Are there any like grey plants that you're wanting that you like know of that you want to get into the collection, or is it everything's in there and then you need to discover them before you can actually bring them in?
Oh, there would be so many. There's already an amazing kind of range that's in there. I feel like there's still so many that could be introduced. And I am excited because as part of Mifgus, which happened recently, they had a lot of plants that were sort of arranged and used in that display, in their display garden, that aren't currently in the Grey Garden at the moment, which we now have the opportunity to use there, some grasses and things. Actually, and then another one is we have an amazing, one of my colleagues is away at, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a Botanic Gardens in Canberra. And so they're having some connection at the moment where they are doing some cuttings to bring back to our gardens, and some of them are grey foliage plants to put in the grey garden collection, and then vice versa. So we will also send them some cuttings that they don't have of species to introduce to their garden. So it's both. There's a big range in the grey garden, but there's always room for more and always looking to introduce new species wherever possible. And it's definitely happened within these projects. For example, we introduced a Pandanus utilis into the city gate garden bed. So that's a beautiful panda. It's stunning. It's got almost a glow of orange around the outside of the leaf. And utilis meaning useful because they used to use it to weave baskets and make mats and things. That is a really fun addition that came as part of this project. But there are many, many new species in there as well, thanks to these couple of projects.
Yeah, I don't reckon I saw that when went on the tour because I'm a big grey foliage fan, so
Mm.
I would have loved that, I reckon.
Oh, you'll have to go and have another look. Were you there? Did you say 3 years ago?
That was last year.
Last year.
Yeah,
You
so
might not, it's almost over the other side of the garden, so you might not have got there in probably the main tour that you would have done,
yeah,
but you'll definitely have to come for a visit.
yeah. I was blown away by how much of the garden is paid for by people, like just people donating money and the
Yeah,
amount that they donate as well. It blew my mind.
yeah, yeah. Oh, we're so lucky to have so many amazing donors, to be honest, and long-term donors, new donors. We're very, very grateful, and we're very, very lucky to have so many people who are extremely generous, and it makes such a huge difference at the gardens. We're very lucky to have them.
And one of the things I was excited to talk to you about because I've never heard of it before was your Instagram bio says escarpment horticulture, and that is that what you spoke about in Singapore as well when you went there?
Yes, yeah, that's what my presentation was about. So that's been such a fun and exciting journey. That's been part of the kind of Grey Garden collection area as well. Taking that on, this was something that I was really fortunate to be able to grow as part of kind of looking after that area. So part of the Grey Garden has a steep sort of sloping area that you can see from the tan track just below the temple. And along there, there's anchor points. So a few years ago, quite a few years ago, well before I started, there was an amazing curator there who actually used to do abseiling on the escarpment to kind of maintain that area. And her name was Alison Rice. And once she left, there were a few curators in between. I think it was uncurated for a period of time. And that kind of skill was lost of the abseiling. I think OH&S became quite a big thing. And so it hadn't really been accessed for a long time, that escarpment. So when I was able to take it over as a curator, and then when my team leader, Tim Ubergang, came onto the site, we both were very excited to kind of start that up again and look into how we could access and manage the plants that were already on the escarpment. And so we knew they had anchor points, and it was just kind of learning to climb and abseil to then be able to access that area. So we did a lot of sort of working from heights courses, a few different courses, and they were really useful. But we did find that this was such a unique area that a lot of the skills we learnt weren't really applicable, to be honest, to that site. So we were so lucky to have such a wonderful arboriculture team at the gardens. And Peter Berby in particular actually came along and created our system for us and taught us how to abseil and climb up and down the escarpment and how to access it. So he made this system from scratch, and he used a lot of his knowledge from arboriculture, and arboriculture techniques, and sort of mixing that in with some working from heights techniques as well, and then abseiling techniques. And yeah, created this really simple and easy to use system that Tim and I now use all the time. And that was kind of the beginning of this amazing and really exciting journey for us, where not only did we kind of get to go down, see the site from a new perspective, once we did that, Tim especially was able to see that this was a new area to host a whole new range of species to the garden, so cliff dwelling species in particular. So sort of a whole new area to get to display a new range of plants, but also a great area to use to host threatened or endangered species in a really protected part of the gardens. Obviously, theft is almost, I don't want to say inevitable, it shouldn't be, but it happens a lot in public gardens. And a lot of species are often under threat because of poaching. And we were able to see that this actually was a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to host threatened species in a really protected site that's really hard to access as well. So part of this whole journey was we were able to do a little trial of a threatened South African species that naturally grows on escarpments, but it's critically endangered and it's almost extinct in the wild due to severe poaching. So we were able to do a little tester and see how they would go growing on this escarpment, if they would be able to kind of handle the really hot and harsh conditions up there. And they did amazingly, these plants. And that was the beginning. We were like, oh my gosh, this is great. We can introduce this whole new variety of species and again, these threatened species and have this wonderful kind of ex situ collection as a backup to hopefully, eventually kind of lead to stewardships and things like that. There's a journey, we're in progress, still kind of testing it out and seeing the boundaries, I think. But our focus is really on using it to help threatened species and again display a lot of cliff dwelling species as well.
So is that what escarpment is? Is that like basically that's the face of a cliff kind of thing?
Yes, so we kind of call it an escarpment rather than a cliff face just because it's on a much smaller scale and it's not exactly like a 180 degrees, it's kind of just a gradual slope. So some areas aren't that steep, but you still need to connect to it by ropes and things. But that's kind of the next part we're leading to. Like we have done now a lot of off-site training on actual cliff faces in Werribee Gorge and Mount Macedon and learning how to fully abseil and climb on those kind of cliff faces with the potential of hopefully going and doing future field trips to again collect threatened or endangered species in the wild and being able to again host them kind of in an ex situ collection. There is, I don't know if it'll happen, we'll see, but there is an opportunity coming up to do potentially a collecting trip in New South Wales to assist with a threatened eucalypt that grows up there. But the cliff face is 300 meters high, so it's a little bit higher than I have experience with. But that's the goal, and that's what we're kind of practicing and aiming and training to get to. So maybe one day, hopefully.
So is that just growing out the side of a cliff, that
Yeah.
eucalyptus?
Yes. Yep.
So
Cliff
is it a
face.
tree form?
Yes. Yep.
Ah,
I think it can be a small tree, but it is amazing. Once you start climbing on these cliff faces, you really do see what they're growing in is nothing. They're almost growing out of rock, and as you said, sideways out of a rock.
yeah.
It's insane, hanging on by a thread, it feels like. Yet they're thriving and they love it.
It makes me wonder how'd they get there? Like how did that seed just land in that spot?
Yes, it's so true. And I know a lot of species too, I think with, again, the threat of poaching and probably environmental threats like fires and things like that, it is pushing more and more species kind of to that edge. So I think it happens a lot of the time where something maybe that we think is extinct, you actually find it growing on the cliff face because that is the final resort for it as well. It's somehow been able to survive and grow there, that's the only place you might find it because it was no longer able to grow in its natural environment. So there's lots of different elements to this, and it's a really exciting, and again, we're still exploring it and figuring it out. But I think that there's a lot to learn here and a lot of species to kind of interact with and discover as well.
And what size is the area at the Botanic Gardens, the escarpment area?
It just runs along. I actually don't know exactly how big it is. It just sort of runs along where the Grey Garden goes. I couldn't even have a guess. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's not huge, and height-wise, it's not huge, but kind of the distance from City Gate to Northern Gate. That's the distance of the escarpment that we look after. it does extend past there, but this is the part that we're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah. And what sort of heights have you been working at, like when you go to the Werribee Gorge and Macedon?
Yeah. I reckon the most that we've done is maybe 50 meters. So not even close. And like that felt high, to be honest.
Oh, well, that's the
So
thing. If you're falling from 50, 300 is not going to be any different.
that's somebody did say that. We were kind of like, oh, 300, like that's a bit bigger than we're used to. And they said it's all the same. If you're falling from 300, you're falling from 50. It's the same. The climbing is still the same. The concept is the same. So it's maybe more the mental thing, wrapping your
Yeah.
mind around it of being like, I've done this before and this is fine. So it's definitely possible, and it's something that I would love to one day do, and just need maybe a bit more practice and more of those kind of field experiences to do that.
Yeah, it is fascinating because it's certainly not something that's ever been in my sort of brain thoughts. But
Yeah,
but when you start thinking about it, like you sort of think of, if you would do revegetation stuff, like
yeah,
how do you plant that kind of stuff into the side of a rock wall, or if
yes,
what's the soil like there, and how do you sort of keep it alive initially?
yes. And like there is a whole unique ecosystem that we've even discovered on our escarpment of, we used to have blue-banded bees at the Botanic Gardens, and then I think they hadn't been seen for a few years. And then when we went up there and we're doing some planting and maintenance up there, we found blue-banded bees kind of burrowing into the escarpment and birds and things nesting up there, and just a whole different ecosystem that we hadn't really expected to find either. So it's a whole new world, to be honest, and so much still to discover. It's a lot of fun. And I agree with how do you plant up there? Sometimes it can be so steep, and we're kind of looking for little nooks or cracks to wedge things into and being like, good luck. We hope you grow sometimes. But they do. They really do. So they're incredibly, it's just an incredible kind of unique situation that we're learning how tough species are and how many things actually do grow in those conditions, which is so exciting.
Yeah, well, if that's where they are found, then they're obviously going to be they're obviously used to coppering and battering because it's a pretty
Yeah.
harsh environment.
Yeah, exactly. It is a very harsh, especially this one is north facing too, so it gets a
Right.
lot of sun, and there's no irrigation up there. So not much water. So you got to be pretty tough to
Yeah.
survive. But again, things are thriving. It's amazing. I think it's sort of another element to it that we're still figuring out too is when we went up there, a lot of the times, of course, weeds are thriving up there too. So we started removing all the weeds, and then we ended up struggling a lot with erosion and being able to control the erosion. And then once we maintained and some of the plants and maybe removed some weeds and really exposed the soil, some of the weeds went crazy and grew back times 1,000.
Yeah.
So we're definitely still finding that balance of how to maintain it and on that journey too. And something that actually came out of my presentation that was in Singapore was attending a wonderful talk by a lady from the Philippines who she discussed using it was a coconut based sort of textile to help them maintain steeper slopes and stop weeds and erosion control methods. And so when we came back, we use a lot of jute mat at the Botanic Gardens, and it just was an amazing idea that came from this lady of let's trial some jute mat up there. And that has worked so far really well at both erosion control and weed control. So
Yeah.
we're slowly discovering little things where we're on this journey, and it's really fun to do. But yeah, we're still figuring out the best way, I think, to maintain a space that's like this.
Yeah. And you have to do a lot of documentation as well. So what you're learning, other people are going to be able to go on with as well.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely part of the presentations and things that we are doing is to help kind of share our learnings. But both ways, we want to hear other people's experiences too, but sharing our learnings, sharing our experiences, sharing things that didn't work at all so that other people don't have to. So definitely research is part of it, connecting with other people, And there are a lot of other places, like, for example, in New South Wales and I think probably Queensland. WA, I know at their Botanic Gardens, they have kind of an escarpment space. So there are other people definitely doing this. So connecting with them and learning from them is a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. So they do the abseiling and the ropes in WA as well.
I believe so. Yes, I'm pretty sure they do. I don't know if they've been doing it for a long time, but I think I heard that they are starting to do that as well at their Botanic Garden. So I would love to go and see it and kind of connect with them and chat with them. I haven't yet, but it's on my list to do for sure.
Yeah. And Andrea said she went to Singapore with you. Was that part of the Botanic Gardens of Australia and New Zealand? Or was that who's?
Yes, it was as in the conference. What
Yeah.
was it for? Yeah, yeah. So it was the eighth Global Botanic Gardens Congress. So it's a congress that they hold every 4 years. I believe because of COVID, this one was actually 2 years apart. So they hosted the seventh one at the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne 2 years prior. And then this one they hosted in Singapore. And so I was very lucky to get a scholarship to be able to go and attend. And then again, very lucky to actually get the opportunity to present there as well. And it just coincidence that Andrea was there. And there actually were a lot of people from Victoria that went to Singapore, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Andrea was going representing her company and her landscaping business, but also I think as part of the, what is it called? Landscape succession plan? Landscape succession planning? Something like that.
Yep.
But that one I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, going and representing a few different things in her business as well. And I also had my manager from the Botanic Gardens come too, and they were representing their Climate Change Alliance. And Tessa and Peter were involved in that. So a lot of people from Melbourne, a lot of people from Australia. I think there were some people from Sydney Botanic Gardens too. So it was amazing to see so many representing their gardens and sharing their work. Same with everyone from all over the world. And I made some amazing connections with people who were doing similar things in Mexico and in Africa. I got some great questions on kind of how we're planting our plants on escarpments because they're doing the same thing but in situ, so back into the wild in Africa, which is incredible. Huge, huge work, so impressive. San Diego Zoo were looking at doing a similar thing on their escarpment at the zoo. Made incredible connections with people all over the world, which was so much fun. And it's so nice to still be nurturing those connections and, having the opportunity to maybe go over and visit them soon and get to do some of their field trips and their work with them, hopefully,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Had you been to Singapore before?
I hadn't, no. And so part of that was we got to do tours of the Singapore Botanic Garden, their island, which I think is called Pulau Ubin. We did a tour of as well. They put on a big, wonderful dinner for all of us and so many different presentations and workshops and things too. Just one of the best things. I definitely recommend it if it's ever possible. Every 4 years they go, so definitely worth having a look to go. But have you ever been to Singapore?
Yeah, about 10 years ago it was. And it
Oh,
was phenomenal.
oh, such a beautiful. I actually want to go back because we were there a while. I think we were there for 6 or 7 days, and even that, I'm like, it's not enough.
Yeah.
We didn't. I reckon we did a quarter of the Botanic Garden.
Yeah, I don't think I even went to the Botanic Gardens.
Did you go to the Cloud Hill or the
Yeah, the
Gardens by the
Cloud
Bay?
Dome and Flower Dome, I think they had. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was going to ask you about that because in one of them there's a massive waterfall with heaps of plants coming out from the
yeah.
side. So
Yes,
I got
yeah,
to know how kind of realistic that is, like that
yeah.
what they've got there. But did you
Yeah.
have a good look at that?
I had a look at it. There was a tour and I wasn't able to go on the tour. So that is one thing that we'll be booking in for next time because it's so relevant. And I
Yeah.
actually am not sure how they maintained that whole area. But I definitely went and had a look and was amazed. They they just feel like they're on another level there, don't they?
Yeah,
Just do what they do and they do it so well.
yeah, and the like the humidity and the temperature there helps as well. Like you can just look at plants and they'll grow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think we were having a little bit of envy because we were like, well, we have that at our garden, but it's not growing the same way. Why doesn't ours look like that?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and just
very
yeah,
happy.
some of the plants that grow there, like I'm a big fan of the Bismarck palm, but they don't do well here. Like they'll live, but not they won't thrive down here. But
Yes,
they're just like a baby blue, the foliage there,
yes,
and there's
yes.
hundreds of them.
Yes. Oh, I'm so jealous of that too. And that is actually, I have a funny story of that because part of the Grey Garden is that it's an amazing collection for kind of I think it's a great example of climate match species. And we're always looking to kind of plant species now that are not only suitable for today's climate, but also our future predicted climate. And so we have the climate assessment tool, which is a great tool to be able to see how plants are going to, well, it's predicted how they might behave in our future predicted climate. And so using that, we saw that the Bismarck palm was really a wonderful species for future predicted climate. So we thought, great, this is going to be a wonderful introduction to plant into the Grey Garden. We know it grows really well in Queensland. I think it's Madagascar, is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were so excited about that. And we got these Bismarck palms in and we planted them. And when we planted them, it was a few years ago where it was just such a wet season. And I think we'd had a wet winter, I believe, then going into summer, it was a really wet summer. And it actually was too cold for them. So they would have been fine in the heat, but it was too cold and they died.
Yeah. Right.
So looking at them over there, it was like, oh,
Mm,
look away.
yeah.
Painful.
Are there ever any plants where you think like you love it and you want to put it in anything, but it's not really great? You think, oh, it's kind of got a little bit of grey in there.
I feel like this has been a long time debate of between curators, probably too, of whether do you introduce green or host green plants in the collection to then show off how grey the foliage is, or is
Mm,
it no, this is the grey garden, everything should be strictly grey. I think
mm,
it's been a long-term debate. There's definitely green foliage mixed in there, and they thrive and they do really well in those conditions. So, I'm not going to remove them. But I think that definitely I love that a lot of the grey foliage plants have those cool adaptations and kind of maybe that powdery waxy coating and things, and that's always really fun to show off. But as well, like we do have a strong influence of Canary Island species, which I find are usually green, but obviously thrive in that same condition. So they don't have to be sort of grey to be able to survive in this hotter climate that's displayed there. Plenty of green foliage plants will as well.
yeah.
But I do think that it's finding the balance for the grey garden of how green or how grey do you want to go.
Mm, yeah. So with your presentation in Singapore, how long did that have to go for?
It was 15 minutes with 5 minutes of questions at the end.
Did you
So,
have any questions?
yes, I did, which was so exciting. I think I had time for three questions and they were great questions too. So I have to admit, I was absolutely terrified. This is my first big presentation that I had done. And I had been, when I found out that I was getting the opportunity to present there, I booked myself straight in for after work Toastmasters classes because I was like, I've got to get my public speaking up to scratch. I don't know if you know what Toastmasters is.
No.
It's like I think it's maybe voluntarily run, but it's like a community class where you can go. They usually have them one night during the week and they kind of let you practice your public speaking. So they have these little groups all over Melbourne, and it's just whoever wants to go and join and practice public speaking, they give you advice. There's usually a group of amazing people who are really encouraging and supportive. But it's just sort of another way to get that experience and to practice. I had to do it straight away. I was like, I must go and do this because when I'm there, I want to give it my absolute best shot. So I did that, I think, 6 months before I went to Singapore to get ready.
And then did you like time yourself doing your presentation a few times beforehand?
My poor partner can quote the first, I reckon, 2 minutes of my presentation. Absolutely. I practiced it 1,000 times. I timed myself every time. I actually had, I think I was sort of right on time with my presentation. I don't know if I would have had enough time for questions, but I had a funny moment where I was wrapping up my presentation and I had planned it out really awkwardly where I was saying my thank yous and then I was hoping to finish with this kind of like, kind of kick-ass statement. But once I said my thank yous, everyone started clapping. And I remember freezing and being like, do I go ahead and just keep talking or do I just leave it there? And so thankfully I just left it there. I didn't do my end kind of punchline, but it left enough time for questions. So even though I felt like I had planned it all perfectly, it always goes a little differently, but I actually think it was a really good thing.
Yeah, and it's always good if you get questions. Otherwise, at the end, it says, "They're not got any questions," and you just hear silence and no one puts their hand up.
That's the dreaded moment that I actually hadn't thought about until I think a few people before me who everyone had questions, but then I went, oh my goodness, should I have worded some people up to like
Yeah.
have questions prepared? But I think because it was such a wonderful kind of event and everyone there is so excited to be there and so interested, it would be very hard to have no questions.
Yeah. So did you, other than the that coconut matting, did you learn much else by just being at the conference?
Oh, absolutely. I learned so much. And I think the main thing really was like the connections and meeting people who are doing similar works as well, but just everyone doing it a little differently. Like, again, the people from South Africa who are doing the planting on cliff faces, but back in situ. That was amazing to hear their stories and all their conservation works that they're contributing to as well.
But where do you see yourself? Like, what are your plans for the next? Do you have like goals or plans for that you work towards at work that you're ticking off?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've been really fortunate, to be honest. This presentation that I've done has led to a lot of opportunities and amazing things that I didn't expect to be doing. So, for example, writing an article for the Vegans magazine was just an insane opportunity that sort of came from that presentation. And a few online presentations and two of the things that again came from doing this presentation in Singapore. So I actually do find that, especially at the gardens, it kind of naturally evolves in itself. Same with the escarpment horticulture. It's just sort of gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's definitely a focus of mine for sure, is to keep growing the escarpment horticulture. I would love to eventually do a field trip to go and collect maybe a threatened species to help in that conservation kind of process and maybe have backups in the seed bank or on the escarpment as well. That's definitely a focus of mine and kind of, again, that rabbit hole that I've fallen down. Conservation, I just want to keep learning about it and finding new and creative ways to make a difference in that space. Again, I feel like I'm just at the surface level. I'm ready to take a deep dive into it. I think that's kind of where I'm heading to next. There will always be things that come up, and again, just continuing to introduce new species into the grey garden and, keep that as a thriving and happy space. I think that hoping to continue to encourage blue-banded bees to come into the gardens, which I've definitely seen a few around, but I know they're really attracted to blue and purple flowering plants. So that's at the front of my mind of planting more of those species in the grey garden.
Are there two creams in there?
Yes, I've got some. Actually, I reckon I could add a few more though, for sure.
Because they got the
They're,
purple flower.
they're lovely. There's another one of my favorites, which is Centuria cineraria, which I looked up where it's from today. It's from the south of Italy, but it has an amazing purple flower. It's stunning. And it was one of the ones we accidentally just we had a few in the nursery and there was lots in the grey garden. We said, oh, let's have a Google, and it said that it grew well on cliff faces. So we trialed it on the escarpment and it's taken off. It loves it. So a very interesting, it's a fun plant. I love that one.
And when you say you're collecting endangered species, is that, I assume it depends on what type it is on how you do that, like whether it's from seed or cuttings. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole process to that as well. Like there's a lot of, getting all the right certificates and things, collaboration with traditional owners. There is a whole process to that. And yeah, it does depend on the plant. So this one I discussed earlier that's in New South Wales, that would be seed, collecting seed, and hopefully storing that in our seed bank. But yeah, it does depend on the plant. Some you could take cuttings of. Probably most, I would say, best from seed.
Yep. And last question for you, Amy, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
Yes. Oh, honestly, the list is endless. But if
I think
you
Chloe
can,
gave me five names on her list. Hers.
okay, good. That makes well. How about four? Is four okay?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
suitable.
So I definitely want to recommend Andrea Savage, who I spoke about, who was my teacher. So she's got, a strong history of horticulture and then went into the teaching. I would actually love to hear her on the podcast to learn more about even her journey into horticulture. I think she would be so interesting. Another person who would be amazing is Emma Simpkins, who's in New Zealand. And she actually presented before me at the Singapore Congress. And she does a lot of incredible conservation works in New Zealand, but is really connected as well with the Botanic Gardens there. So she would be so amazing. And then, of course, I think everybody from the Botanic Gardens, the Royal Botanic Gardens in Victoria, both Melbourne and Cranbourne, everybody would be incredible to get on the show. I know that's probably not practical, but they all have an amazing story to share, an amazing history. But in particular, if I had to pick somebody, I think I would definitely recommend Tim Ubergang, who is my team leader, and also my climbing partner and has been on this journey with me. And he has a really strong focus, and I would say he's an expert in cycads. So he's really interesting. He would be great to talk to. And then my final person is definitely Terry Smythe, who I think is one of our longest working horticulturists at the gardens. I think she's been there over 30 years, was an incredible mentor to me, looks after the Southern Chinese collection, and is one of the most incredible horticulturists that I know. Her knowledge is unbeatable. I feel like she knows everything about everything. So she would also be an amazing person to have on the show. But again, everybody at the gardens would be amazing. So it's hard to pick, but they're maybe my top two.
Yeah. Well, they're also people who are passionate about what they do, which is my
Yeah,
favorite people to talk to as well. So
definitely. Yeah.
some great recommendations, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. I was excited to talk to you about what you do, and it's lived up to it. So I absolutely, and I love that you get to do something that you enjoy for work. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much
Very.
for coming on and sharing, and looking forward to following on with what you get up to.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been so much fun. I really appreciate you having me on.